The United States Supreme Court just told Donald Trump very clearly that he went too far, that he abused emergency powers, and that he cannot use a decade-old crisis law to rewrite global trade policy. And Trump did what Trump always does when he loses. He didn't reflect, he didn't adjust, he didn't take the responsibility. He threw a tantrum on social media. And behind all that noise, behind all that chest-thumping bravado, something much more important happened. Something most people are missing. And yes, Trump lost in court, but politically, he may have just found his escape hatch. And that's what we are going to break down today without the nonsense. So what the Supreme Court actually did. So in a 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court struck down Donald Trump's use of the International Emergency Economic Power Act, a 1977 law designed for actual emergencies, wars, sanctions, financial crises, not trade wars manufactured for political leverage. Trump used that law to impose sweeping tariffs on China, Canada, Mexico, Europe, and effectively the global economy. The court said, no, you do not get to declare a permanent economic emergency just because you like tariffs. You do not get to bypass Congress because it's inconvenient. In simple terms, the court reminded Trump of something he hates being reminded of. The presidency is not a throne, and that decision didn't just strike down tariffs. It destroyed the most powerful part of Trump's trade strategy, the shock factor. No more overnight tariffs, no more threats by tweet, no more say something I don't like and I'll blow up your supply chain tomorrow. And that power is gone. Now the economic scale people are ignoring. According to federal data published in December 2025, the US Treasury collected over $133 billion in tariff revenue. Total exposure now sits closer to $170 billion. The long-term economic cost of Trump's tariff regime, nearly $3 trillion over the next decade. That's not theoretical, that's higher prices, that's inflation, and that's reduced purchasing power. And now here's the part they don't want to talk about. More than 1,500 companies have already filed the lawsuit demanding refund. The Supreme Court didn't decide what happens to that money, so now we are heading straight into what one justice openly warned could become a logistical nightmare, and Trump knows it. So why this loss is actually politically convenient. And here's where the story flips and where most coverage completely fails. So tariffs are basically hidden taxes. When the government puts a tariff on imports, companies don't absorb it, they pass it on consumers. So prices go up and people end up paying more for food, phones, cars, clothes. That's why tariffs are unpopular, especially when inflation is already high. And now here's the key part. Trump does not want to be blamed for high prices going into elections. And what peak tariff means. So peak tariff means tariff got so high that keeping them that high starts hurting politically more than it helps. Before Trump, average US tariff rate was 2%. After Trump jumped to 15% plus. This is extreme by modern standards. That level raises inflation, slows growth, anger consumers, upset businesses. So even Trump's own team knew we can't keep escalating forever. That's why even before the Supreme Court ruling, officials were already delaying some tariffs, granting exemptions, talking about reboots, softening enforcement quietly. They just did not want to admit it publicly. The court didn't just stop Trump, it gave him cover. Now Trump can let tariffs fall without looking weak. Instead of saying tariff caused inflation, so I'm reducing them, he gets to say I love tariff, the court forced my hand. And that's the escape hatch. He avoids admitting failure, admitting tariffs hurt people, angering his base, and he still gets the benefit. Prices come down, inflation eases, political pressure reduces. If Trump simply does nothing after the ruling, most emergency tariffs disappear, average rates fall automatically, consumers feel relief, and he didn't have to sign a retreat order. The court did it for him. And why this is smart politics even if it's accidental. From a political standpoint, this is perfect from Trump. He gets to play the victim activist course, keep pro-tariff rhetoric alive, avoid price blame, quietly reduce economic pain. He loses legally but wins narratively. Now, because Trump cannot help himself, he immediately tried to look tough. Within hours of losing at the Supreme Court, he announced a new 10% global tariff, claiming authority under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. But here's the problem. Section 122 only applies in cases of a fundamental international payment crisis. The United States does not have one, no balance of payment emergency, no collapse, no crisis, which means once again this is legally dubious at best and unlawful at worst. And even if it were legal, it expires automatically after 150 days. So this is not a real policy pivot, it's a political flare. The refund dilemma where the real fight is. Now we get to the part that actually terrifies the administration, that is refund. If court order refunds, and legally that's very possible, the Treasury says it has the cash. But here's the catch. Who gets the money? Importers, retailers, consumers, or shareholder? What if companies already passed the cost into consumers? Do they keep the money? Do they reinvest? Or do they issue dividends? Some analyst estimates that if tariffs aren't fully replaced, the average US households could see a $1,200 boost in real income in 2026. Not life-changing but meaningful. And politically that's dangerous for Trump. Because once people feel relief, they remember who caused the pain. And here's something Wall Street understand. Even if cable news doesn't, this ruling reduce volatility. No more tariff rot, no more 3 a.m. trade threats, no more policy whiplash. And that matters for market supply chain, investment planning, and it doesn't mean tariffs are gone. Trump still has other tools, Section 301 investigation, industry-specific duties, and country-by-country negotiation. But those take time, they require evidence, and they involve public comment. And they remove the cruelty and immediacy. And that's exactly what the court just did. And the bigger shift nobody's naming. This wasn't just about tariffs, this was about power. For decades, Congress quietly handed trade authority to the executive branch. This ruling pulls some of that power back. It tells the world something important. The United States still has internal constraints. President cannot rule by economic emergency forever. Courts still matter, law still matter. And that signal alone changes how allies, rivals, and investors calculate risk. And Trump knows it. That's why he's furious. He gets to quietly reduce tariff, blame the court, and avoid admitting failure, keep his base energized with symbolic fights, and the era of unilateral overnight tariff shock is over. What replaces it will be slower, more limited, more legal. And that whether Trump admits it or not is a win for the American economy. The question is whether voters see through the escape hatch. Because once you do, the whole strategy collapses.